Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Horizon, watching the stars through the main screen. 3 years into their deep space mission, his crew had found nothing but empty planets and dead rocks. Today felt different, though. The sensors were picking up something strange near the fourth planet of this system. "Captain, we're getting readings I've never seen before," said Ensign Katie Bell from her station. Her young face showed excitement mixed with worry. "There's a ship out there, sir. A big one." Jake moved closer to look at her screen. The object was huge, maybe 5 times the size of the horizon. Its design was unlike anything humans had ever built. Sharp angles and crystal-like surfaces reflected the light from the nearby star. "Dr. Grant, what do you think?" Jake asked the ship's scientist. Dr. Lisa Grant was already studying the readings. She was the best xenobiologist in the fleet, and if anyone could figure out what they were looking at, it was her. "It's definitely artificial, Captain, and there are life signs aboard. This could be it. First contact with an alien species." Jake felt his heart beat faster. Humanity had been searching for other intelligent life for centuries. If this was real, everything would change. "Katie, try to establish communication. Use the standard first contact protocols." Katie worked at her console, sending out mathematical sequences and basic symbols. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then the alien ship began moving toward them. "They're responding," Katie said. "I'm getting signals back, but they're complex. Give me a moment to run them through the translation system." Lieutenant Commander Rick Hayes, the ship's weapons officer, looked nervous. "Captain, should I ready our defenses? We don't know their intentions." "Not yet, Rick. Let's see what they want first." Jake believed in peaceful contact. Earth had sent them out here to explore and make friends, not to fight. The alien ship came closer, and Jake could see more details. It looked like it was made of living crystal that glowed with soft blue light. Beautiful but strange. Whoever built this had technology far beyond anything humans possessed. "I've got something," Katie announced. "Basic translation is working. They're calling themselves the Valdari. They say they want to talk." "Open a channel," Jake ordered. The main screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at an alien face. The creature had features like a human, but its skin was made of what looked like blue crystal. Its eyes glowed with inner light, and when it spoke, its voice was deep and musical. "I am War Commander Zexthul of the Valdari Empire," the alien said. "You are in our territory. State your purpose here." Jake stepped forward. "I'm Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Horizon. We're explorers from the planet Earth. We come in peace, seeking knowledge and friendship with other species." The alien's face changed, showing what might have been surprise or confusion. "Earth, we have no record of this world. You appear weak and small. How did you travel so far?" Dr. Grant whispered to Jake. "Their culture might value strength above all else. We should be careful how we present ourselves." Jake nodded and spoke again to the alien. "We may look different from you, but we've traveled far to reach this place. Perhaps we could learn from each other. Would you be willing to meet and share knowledge?" War Commander Zexthul was quiet for a long moment. Then he made a sound that might have been laughter. "You offer to teach us? You who hide inside a metal shell and speak of peace. The Valdari Empire has ruled this sector for 10,000 years. We are warriors, not teachers of weaklings." Rick stepped closer to Jake. "Captain, I don't like the way this is going." The alien continued talking. "However, you interest me. No species has entered our space for many cycles. You will come aboard our ship and submit to our authority. We will decide if you are worthy to live." Jake felt cold. This wasn't going the way he'd hoped. "War Commander, we appreciate your offer, but we must respectfully decline. We're not here to submit to anyone. We're here as equals, hoping to build understanding between our peoples." The alien's crystal face darkened. "Equals? You dare claim equality with the Valdari? You who have no empire, no conquest, no strength?" His voice rose in anger. "Only warriors deserve to live among the stars. You speak of peace like cowards." "Captain," Dr. Grant said quietly, "I think we've made a serious cultural error. They seem to interpret our peaceful approach as weakness." On the screen, War Commander Zexthul stood up. Behind him, other Valdari moved around what looked like a command center. They were all tall and powerful, with crystal armor that gleamed in the light. "You refuse the honor of serving the Empire," Zexthul declared. "This proves you are not worthy of life. Your weakness disgusts us. Prepare to face the judgment of true warriors." The communication ended and the screen went black. "Captain, they're powering weapons," Rick reported. "Energy signatures unlike anything in our database. We need to get out of here now." Jake's mind raced. Everything had gone wrong so quickly. One moment they were making history, the next they were about to die. All hands battle stations. Rick, raise shields and prepare to return fire. Sir, our weapons are no match for theirs, Rick said. We're designed for exploration, not war. The Valdari ship fired first. Beams of pure energy struck the Horizon's shields, causing the whole ship to shake. Warning lights flashed throughout the bridge. Shields down to 60%, Rick reported. Hull damage on decks 5 and 6. Jake grabbed his chair as another blast hit them. The lights flickered and he could hear the sounds of metal being torn apart. Katie, send a distress signal to Earth Command. Let them know what happened here. Signal sent, Captain, but it will take years to reach Earth. The Valdari fired again, and this time the energy beam cut through their weakened shields like they weren't there. The ship shook violently, throwing people to the floor. Hull breach on deck 4, someone shouted. We're losing atmosphere. Jake looked at his crew. They were scared but ready to fight. They hadn't come this far to die without trying. Rick, target their weapon systems. All available power to forward guns. The Horizon fired back with everything they had. Their missiles and energy weapons struck the alien ship, but the attacks barely seemed to affect it. The Valdari vessel was simply too advanced, too strong. Captain, they're launching smaller ships, Katie warned. Looks like boarding pods. Jake realized their situation was hopeless. The aliens had superior technology, superior firepower, and no interest in peace. Now they were about to board the Horizon with warriors who saw humans as weak and unworthy of life. But Jake Morrison and his crew weren't going to give up without a fight, even if they were about to discover just how wrong the Valdari were about human weakness. The Valdari boarding pods crashed into the Horizon's hull like metallic meteors. Each impact sent shockwaves through the ship, rattling the walls and causing emergency lights to flicker on throughout the corridors. Commander Alex Stone led his Marines through the lower decks, moving quickly but carefully. At 42 years old, he had fought in 3 different conflicts, but never against aliens. His team was small, only 20 Marines against an unknown number of enemy warriors. Sergeant Rodriguez, take your squad to Deck 5, Alex ordered through his radio. Right, you and your demolitions team secure the engine room. They can't take the ship if they can't control the power. Sergeant Maya Rodriguez was already moving with her combat engineers. She had served under Stone for 5 years and trusted his judgment completely. Copy that, Commander. What about the bridge? I'll handle that with the remaining team. Remember, we don't know their capabilities yet. Stay sharp and watch each other's backs. The first breach came on Deck 4. Valdari warriors poured through the hole in the ship's hull, their crystal armor gleaming under the emergency lighting. They were tall, maybe 7 feet each, and moved with deadly grace. In their hands were weapons that looked like they were carved from glowing stone. Corporal Ben Wright had been setting explosive charges near the engine room when he heard the sound of approaching footsteps. He pressed himself against the wall and waited. 3 Valdari warriors came around the corner, speaking in their musical language. Ben had never seen anything like them. Their armor seemed to be part of their bodies growing from their crystal skin. Their eyes glowed bright blue, and when they moved, there was no sound at all. These were creatures built for war. He activated his radio and whispered, "This is right. I've got eyes on 3 hostiles near engineering. They're big, they're armed, and they look like they know what they're doing." The first battle began in the main corridor of Deck 5. Maya and her squad were waiting when the Valdari came through the breach. The aliens moved in formation, covering each other like experienced soldiers. "Open fire," Maya ordered. The humans used standard kinetic weapons, rifles that fired metal bullets at high speed. The sound was loud and harsh in the metal corridors. The Valdari seemed surprised by this. They had expected energy weapons like their own. The first alien warrior took 3 bullets to the chest and staggered backward. His crystal armor cracked but didn't break completely. He raised his weapon and fired back, sending a beam of pure energy down the hallway. Maya dove to one side as the energy blast melted a hole in the wall behind her. "These things are tough," she called out. "Aim for the joints in their armor." On the bridge, Dr. Grant was working frantically at her computer station while the battle raged around the ship. She had managed to access some data from the Valdari ship during their brief communication link. "Captain, I'm finding something strange in their database," she called out over the sound of weapons fire from the lower decks. "There are old records here, really old. References to something called Grimspawn." Jake was coordinating the defense from his command chair. "What kind of references?" "Warning files, sir. military records from thousands of years ago. It looks like they fought a war against some species they called the Grimspawn. According to this, they were terrified of them. Katie looked up from her communications station. Dr. Grant, can you translate any details? I'm trying, but their ancient language is different from what they speak now. Lisa's fingers flew over her controls. Wait, I'm getting something. The Grimspawn used weapons that the Valdari describe as death seeds that could steal the essence of life. And they fought with a fury that made even Valdari warriors freeze in terror. Down in the corridors, the fighting was getting worse. Commander Stone had lost 2 Marines already, but they had managed to stop the Valdari advance toward the bridge. The aliens were good fighters, but they seemed confused by human tactics. The Valdari fought with honor and precision. They moved in perfect formation and followed rules of combat that went back thousands of years. The humans fought like desperate animals, using every trick and dirty method they could think of. Ben Wright proved this when he ambushed a group of Valdari warriors in the engine room. Instead of facing them directly, he had rigged the entire section with explosives and traps. When the aliens entered, he brought down part of the ceiling on them and then attacked with grenades while they were confused. The Valdari who survived the trap seemed shocked. In their culture, warriors faced each other openly. This kind of sneaky fighting was something they had only heard about in old stories. Commander Stone, came Wright's voice over the radio. I took out 6 hostiles in engineering, but I'm hearing chatter on their communication frequencies. They're calling for reinforcements and using words I don't understand. Something about ancient protocols and forgotten warnings. Back on the bridge, Dr. Grant was making progress with the translation. Captain, I think I know why they're acting strange. These Grimspawn records describe creatures that fought exactly like we're fighting now. Ambushes, explosive traps, weapons that fire solid projectiles instead of energy. Are you saying they think we're these Grimspawn? Jake asked. I'm saying the similarities are too close to ignore. Look at this. Lisa put her findings on the main screen. Ancient Valdari text scrolled by with her translation underneath. The Grimspawn were described as deathwalkers who showed no fear, and creatures who would die rather than surrender. They used primitive weapons that could not be stopped by energy shields. Jake realized what she was saying. The Valdari had energy-based technology and defenses designed to stop other energy weapons. But human kinetic weapons, bullets, explosives, metal projectiles, were passing right through their defenses because they weren't designed to stop solid objects. Maya's voice came through the communication system, breathing heavy from combat. Bridge, this is Rodriguez. We've pushed them back for now, but they're regrouping. And sir, something weird is happening. Some of the younger aliens are starting to panic when they see us fighting. It's like they're scared of something. Dr. Grant looked at her translation again. Captain, according to this, the war with the Grimspawn ended when the Grimspawn simply disappeared. The Valdari thought they had destroyed them completely. These records are over 10,000 years old. So they think the Grimspawn are extinct, Jake said. More than that, sir. They think we might be the Grimspawn returned from the dead. On Deck 5, a young Valdari warrior named Velthar was experiencing something no Valdari had felt in thousands of generations. As he watched the human Marines fight with desperate courage, using weapons and tactics described in the oldest military archives, genetic memories began stirring in his mind. His ancestors had encoded warnings about the Grimspawn directly into Valdari DNA. For 10,000 years, these memories had been dormant. But now, watching humans fight with the same terrifying determination described in the ancient records, those memories were awakening. The humans didn't fight like any civilized species. They set traps, used their environment as a weapon, and showed no fear of death. Worse, they seemed to fight harder when their friends were killed, not weaker. Velthar had been trained as a warrior from birth, but as he watched a human soldier sacrifice himself to save 2 others, something deep in his genetic memory screamed a warning. This was how the Grimspawn had fought. This was why his ancestors had feared them. And if the humans were Grimspawn, then the Valdari Empire was about to face an enemy they thought they had destroyed long ago. An enemy that had once made the greatest warriors in the galaxy flee in terror. The battle was far from over, but already some Valdari were beginning to remember why their ancestors had been so afraid. Chief Engineer Tom Blake was 61 years old and had seen every kind of crisis a starship could face. But as he worked in the damaged engineering section, jury-rigging weapons from industrial equipment, he had never felt more alive. The Valdari had taken control of 3 decks, but they were moving slowly now. Reports from the Marines indicated that the aliens were becoming more cautious, more fearful. Tom didn't understand why, but he wasn't going to waste the opportunity. "Dr. Foster, hand me that magnetic accelerator," Tom called to the ship's historian. Dr. Carl Foster was normally buried in ancient texts and old languages, but today he was helping build weapons. "Tom, are you sure this will work?" Carl asked, passing over the heavy device they had removed from the ship's ore processing system. "It's going to work just fine," Tom said, attaching power cables to the accelerator. "This thing can launch a metal rod at 3,000 meters per second. That's faster than any bullet. The Valdari won't know what hit them." Carl had been studying Dr. Grant's translations of the ancient Valdari records. The more he read, the more convinced he became that humanity's connection to the Grimspawn was no coincidence. "Tom, I think I understand what's happening here. These Valdari records describe a war that happened over 10,000 years ago. The Grimspawn weren't just another alien species. They were specifically described as beings that looked almost exactly like us." Tom paused in his work. "What do you mean, exactly like us?" "Same height, same basic body structure, same behavioral patterns. The records even mention that Grimspawn had different skin colors and hair types, just like humans do." Carl showed Tom his tablet with the translated text. "Look at this description. The Grimspawn appeared as we do, but their eyes held the coldness of death and their hearts knew no fear of the void." Down on Deck 4, Commander Stone was experiencing the strangest battle of his military career. The Valdari warriors were skilled and dangerous, but they were starting to make mistakes. Some of the younger aliens would freeze up when they saw humans fighting, as if they were seeing ghosts. "Rodriguez, do you copy?" Alex spoke into his radio while taking cover behind a damaged bulkhead. "I'm here, Commander. We've got the enemy pinned down in Section 12, but something weird is happening. One of their warriors just started screaming and ran away when Martinez charged him with a bayonet." Alex had noticed the same thing. The Valdari were becoming more afraid of close combat. When humans got within a few meters of them, some of the aliens would panic and retreat. It was like they were fighting their own instincts. On the bridge, Captain Morrison was listening to reports from all over the ship. The situation was still desperate, but patterns were emerging that gave him hope. "Dr. Grant, what else can you tell me about these Grimspawn?" Jake asked. Lisa had been working nonstop on the translations. "Captain, I found something important. The war ended not because the Valdari won, but because the Grimspawn simply left. The records say they returned to the void from which they came after a final battle that left both sides nearly destroyed. So they retreated?" "Not retreated, sir. According to this, they chose to leave. The Valdari were so damaged by the war that they couldn't pursue. But here's the interesting part. The records suggest that the Grimspawn left voluntarily as if they had completed some purpose." Katie looked up from her station. "Dr. Grant, I'm intercepting Valdari communications. They're using old codes, ancient protocols, and they keep mentioning something called Containment Protocol 7. "Containment Protocol 7, Dr. Grant repeated, searching her files. "That's mentioned in the older records. It was some kind of emergency procedure created specifically for dealing with Grimspawn incursions. The implications were clear. The Valdari weren't just fighting humans. They thought they were fighting the return of their ancient enemy. And their military was automatically activating procedures that hadn't been used in 10,000 years. In the lower decks, Tom Blake had finished his improvised weapon. The magnetic accelerator was now mounted on a mobile cart, with a targeting system cobbled together from sensor equipment. It wasn't pretty, but it would work. "Carl, help me get this thing to the front lines," Tom said. "I want to see what happens when we give the Valdari a taste of real human engineering." They pushed the cart through the damaged corridors, passing scenes of battle. The ship looked like a war zone with blast marks on the walls and debris scattered everywhere. But the human crew was still fighting, still refusing to give up. When they reached Commander Stone's position, Tom set up his weapon and aimed it down the corridor where a group of Valdari warriors was advancing. The aliens were moving cautiously, their crystal armor gleaming in the emergency lights. "What is that thing?" Alex asked, looking at Tom's creation. "It's a railgun," Tom said with pride. "Fires a solid metal rod at hypersonic speed. Their energy shields won't stop it because it's not an energy weapon." He pulled the trigger. The accelerator hummed for a moment, then fired with a sound like thunder. The metal rod streaked down the corridor faster than the eye could follow, and struck the lead Valdari warrior in the center of his chest. The crystal armor, designed to deflect energy weapons, shattered like glass. The warrior was thrown backward 10 feet and didn't get up. The other Valdari stopped moving. They stared at their fallen comrade, then at the humans. One of them began making a sound that could only be described as whimpering. Did he just whimper? Alex asked in amazement. Down the corridor, the Valdari were backing away. But it wasn't an orderly retreat. Some of them were showing signs of panic. One warrior dropped his weapon and ran. Another was shaking so badly he could barely stand. Carl was watching all of this with the eye of a historian. Tom, I think we just triggered something in their genetic memory. Look at how they're reacting. On their ship, War Commander Zexthul was receiving reports that made no sense. His warriors were describing humans who fought like creatures from the oldest nightmares, weapons that passed through energy shields, tactics that seemed to come from the forbidden archives. Sub-Commander Velthar report? Zexthul demanded. Velthar's voice was strained when he replied. War Commander, the humans are not fighting like any civilized species. They use explosive devices, projectile weapons, and they show no fear of death. When we kill one, the others fight harder, not weaker. Zexthul felt something cold in his stomach. These were the same reports his ancestors had filed 10,000 years ago. Are you saying they fight like the Grimspawn, War Commander? Exactly like the Grimspawn. Back on the horizon, Jake was beginning to understand their situation. The humans weren't just fighting for their lives. They were accidentally recreating the tactics and weapons that had once terrified the most powerful empire in the galaxy. All hands. This is the captain, Jake announced over the ship's communication system. I want everyone to know what we're dealing with. The Valdari think we're the return of an enemy they fought long ago, an enemy they called the Grimspawn, an enemy they still fear. He paused, looking around the bridge at his crew. They were battered, exhausted, but still fighting. I don't know if we're really connected to these Grimspawn or not, but I know one thing. We're not going to die quietly. We're not going to surrender to aliens who attack us without cause, and we're not going to let them think humans are weak. Throughout the ship, the crew heard their captain's words. In the corridors, Marines fixed bayonets to their rifles and prepared for close combat. In engineering, Tom Blake began building more railguns. In the medical bay, wounded crew members picked up weapons and returned to the fight. The Valdari had awakened something in humanity that had been sleeping for thousands of years. They had wanted to face warriors, and now they were about to discover what human warriors were really capable of when their backs were against the wall. The ancient fear was spreading through the Valdari fleet, and for the first time in 10,000 years, the greatest warriors in the galaxy were beginning to remember why they had once fled in terror from creatures called the Grimspawn. 3 hours after the battle began, Admiral Grace Kelly received the distress signal from the horizon. She was commanding a patrol fleet 2 systems away when Katie Bell's message reached her ship, the UES Liberty. At 55, Admiral Kelly had been fighting pirates and hostile aliens for most of her adult life. But as she listened to the message describing first contact gone wrong in a species called the Valdari, she knew this was something different. Captain Davis, set course for the Kepler 442 system, maximum speed. She ordered her fleet commander. Captain Nick Davis was already working at his station. Admiral, at full speed we can be there in 6 hours. Should I alert the other ships? Do it. And Nick, send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we may have found something important. Grace paused, studying the star charts. Also, contact the Archaeological Division. I want every expert on ancient human civilizations we can get. The reason for her request became clear when she read the full translation of the Valdari records that Dr. Grant had transmitted. The description of the Grimspawn was too detailed, too specific to be coincidence. Back on the horizon, the battle had changed character completely. The Valdari warriors were still dangerous, but many of them were now fighting their own instincts as much as they were fighting humans. Sub-Commander Velthar was experiencing something no Valdari had felt in 10,000 years. Every time he saw a human warrior, genetic memories flooded his mind. Images of ancient battles, warnings passed down through generations, and most terrifying of all, the memory of how the war with the Grimspawn had ended. He was leading a squad through the ship's corridors when they encountered Corporal Wright and his demolitions team. The humans had turned a simple hallway into a death trap, with explosive charges hidden in the walls and ceiling. When the first Valdari warrior triggered a mine, Wright appeared from nowhere, screaming a war cry and charging with a knife in each hand. It was a scene straight from the Forbidden Archives. A Grimspawn warrior showing no fear of death, using primitive weapons, attacking with the fury of a creature that lived for battle. Velthar's squad fled. These were warriors who had conquered dozens of worlds, but they ran from one human with knives because their genetic memory told them that this was how the Grimspawn fought. On the Valdari flagship, War Commander Zexthul was receiving reports that made no sense according to modern military doctrine. His warriors were describing humans who set traps like animals, who used their own bodies as weapons, who seemed to become more dangerous when wounded. War Commander, came Velthar's voice over the communicator. I must report that some of our warriors are experiencing difficulties. What kind of difficulties? Fear, sir. Ancient fear. When they face the humans in close combat, they freeze. Some have abandoned their positions. Others are requesting permission to retreat. Zexthul felt his crystal skin grow cold. Are you telling me that Valdari warriors are running from these creatures? Yes, War Commander. The humans fight exactly as described in the Grimspawn archives, and our soldiers are responding exactly as the archives predict we would. Deep in the Valdari ship's computer systems, protocols that had been dormant for millennia were activating automatically. The ship's artificial intelligence was recognizing behavior patterns, weapon signatures, and tactical approaches that matched the ancient Grimspawn threat profile. Warning messages began appearing on screens throughout the Valdari fleet. Grimspawn contingency activated. All units implement Protocol 7. Maintain maximum distance from hostile forces. Avoid close combat engagement. The Valdari soldiers had never seen these warnings before. They were built into the deepest levels of their military software, created by ancestors who had faced the Grimspawn and barely survived. Admiral Kelly's fleet arrived in the system just as the situation reached its peak. From a distance, she could see the massive Valdari ship locked in battle with the much smaller Horizon. Energy weapons lit up the space between them, but something was wrong with the alien formation. Captain Davis, are you seeing this? Grace asked, studying the tactical display. Yes, Admiral. The alien ship is maintaining unusual distance from the Horizon, and their smaller craft seemed to be retreating. It was true. Valdari boarding ships were pulling back from the human vessel, despite having superior numbers and firepower. Some were fleeing the battle entirely. Dr. Carl Foster had been right about the connection between humans and the Grimspawn. But the truth was even stranger than he had imagined. The archaeological team that Admiral Kelly had brought with her carried data from recent excavations on a dozen worlds. The evidence showed that humans had been in space before, thousands of years earlier than their current space age. Ancient human settlements had been found on planets across the galaxy, all abandoned at roughly the same time. And on several worlds they had found battlefields where human weapons and Valdari technology had been buried together. Admiral, reported Dr. Susan Wright, the fleet's chief archaeologist, we've been analyzing the evidence for months without understanding what it meant. But now it's clear. Humanity had a spacefaring civilization over 10,000 years ago. We were the Grimspawn. Grace looked at the evidence with new understanding. What happened to them? Why did they disappear? We think they chose to return to Earth. The archaeological record suggests that the ancient human civilization decided to withdraw from galactic affairs after the war with the Valdari. They abandoned their colonies and went home. On the Horizon, Captain Morrison was beginning to understand the full situation. His crew hadn't just stumbled into a first contact scenario. They had accidentally restarted a war that their own ancestors had fought and won. Dr. Grant, can you access more of their historical records? Jake asked. I'm trying, Captain. But their systems are starting to lock down. I think their computer is recognizing us as a threat and implementing security protocols. What Lisa was seeing confirmed their worst fears. The Valdari military database contained detailed files on human psychology, physiology, and combat tactics. Their ancestors had studied the Grimspawn extensively, trying to understand an enemy that seemed impossible to defeat. The files described humans as death seekers who valued the survival of others above their own existence and creatures who became more dangerous when cornered. Most disturbing of all was a note that the Valdari had never understood how to negotiate with Grimspawn, because humans would choose death over surrender every single time. In the corridors of the horizon, the human crew was proving these ancient observations correct. When Valdari warriors managed to corner groups of humans instead of surrendering, the humans would fight harder. When humans were outnumbered, they would sacrifice themselves to save their crewmates. Sergeant Maya Rodriguez demonstrated this when her squad was trapped in a section that was about to be overrun. Instead of trying to escape, she sent her soldiers to safety and remained behind to hold off the Valdari attack, single-handedly. The sight of one human facing 20 Valdari warriors without fear broke something fundamental in the alien soldiers. 3 of them simply lay down their weapons and refused to fight. Others began backing away, making the whimpering sounds that their ancestors had described in the old reports. Maya was eventually overwhelmed, but not before she had killed 6 Valdari and wounded a dozen more. As she died, she was still fighting, still trying to protect her fellow humans. The news of her sacrifice spread through both fleets. To the humans, she was a hero who had given everything for her friends. To the Valdari, she was proof that the Grimspawn had returned, just as terrifying as the legends described. On the Valdari flagship, War Commander Zexthul was facing a crisis he had never been trained for. Half his boarding parties were requesting immediate extraction. His computer systems were implementing protocols that overrode his direct orders. And worst of all, he was beginning to feel the same ancient fear that was affecting his warriors. All units, fall back to minimum safe distance, he finally ordered. Implement Grimspawn containment protocols. We will wait for reinforcements. It was the first time in Valdari history that a war commander had ordered a retreat from an inferior force. But as Zexthul watched the humans continue to fight against impossible odds, he understood why his ancestors had been so afraid. The Grimspawn weren't just warriors. They were something else entirely, a species that treated death as merely another weapon to use against their enemies. And now they had returned to the stars, ready to remind the galaxy why they had once been feared above all other threats. The battle was far from over, but the psychological war had already been won. The Valdari Empire was about to face its greatest nightmare, the return of an enemy they thought they had defeated forever. War Commander Zexthul stood in his private chambers aboard the Valdari flagship, staring at ancient holographic displays that showed the final battles of the Grimspawn War. For the first time in his long military career, he was experiencing something his people called the deep fear, a terror so profound it was encoded in their very genes. The humans on the horizon had been fighting for over 8 hours. By all military logic, they should have surrendered or died hours ago. Instead, they had grown more dangerous, more desperate, more willing to sacrifice everything to protect each other. This was exactly how the ancient records described the Grimspawn. Sub-Commander Velthar, report to my chambers immediately, Zexthul commanded through his communicator. When Velthar arrived, his crystal armor was cracked and his eyes showed the strain of prolonged combat. But worse than the physical damage was the psychological trauma. He moved like a soldier who had seen ghosts. War Commander, I must request permission to withdraw my remaining forces from the human ship, Velthar said, his voice barely steady. My warriors cannot continue this assault. They are experiencing mass psychological breakdown. Zexthul had been dreading this moment. Explain the situation. The humans fight like creatures possessed by death itself. When we kill one, the others do not retreat. They become more vicious. When we corner them, they set off explosives that kill themselves and us together. When we wound them, they use their own blood to make their weapons more effective. Velthar activated a recording device, showing footage from the battle. On the screen, a human marine with a broken arm was using his fractured bone as a knife, stabbing a Valdari warrior while screaming in rage. This is not civilized warfare, War Commander. This is the madness described in the Forbidden Archives. These creatures do not fear death. They embrace it as a weapon. Aboard the Horizon, Captain Morrison was preparing for what he knew would be the final confrontation. His ship was crippled, half his crew was dead or wounded, and the Valdari still had overwhelming superiority in numbers and technology. But something had changed in the last few hours. The alien attacks had become less coordinated, more hesitant. Admiral Kelly's fleet had arrived and was providing support, but they were still outnumbered 10-1. Dr. Grant, how complete is your translation of their historical records? Jake asked. About 70%, Captain. But I found something important. The original Grimspawn. War didn't end with a final battle. It ended with a single confrontation between the Grimspawn leader and the Valdari war commander of that era. Jake felt pieces of a larger puzzle clicking together. What kind of confrontation? Single combat, sir. According to the records, the Grimspawn leader challenged the Valdari commander to personal battle. When the Valdari won, he expected the Grimspawn to surrender. Instead, the dying Grimspawn leader activated some kind of weapon that would have destroyed both fleets. Dr. Grant brought up the translated text on her screen. The Valdari commander was so terrified by the humans' willingness to choose mutual destruction over defeat that he ordered his entire fleet to retreat. The war ended not because the Grimspawn were defeated, but because the Valdari were too afraid to continue fighting them. Jake understood now. The ancient humans hadn't lost the war. They had scared their enemies so badly that the Valdari had fled rather than risk total annihilation. His communicator crackled to life with a transmission from the Valdari ship. War Commander Zexthol's image appeared on the screen, and Jake could see the fear in the alien's glowing eyes. Human leader, Zexthol said, I invoke the ancient protocols. I challenge you to single combat to decide the fate of both our fleets. Jake looked around the bridge. His crew was watching him with absolute trust. They knew he would do whatever it took to protect them, even if it meant facing an alien warrior in personal combat. I accept your challenge, War Commander. The meeting took place in the Horizon's main cargo bay, which had been cleared of debris and pressurized for the confrontation. Admiral Kelly had wanted to send her best Marines, but Jake had insisted on facing the alien commander himself. Zexthol arrived wearing ceremonial combat armor that gleamed like living crystal. He carried an energy weapon that hummed with barely contained power. He was 7 feet tall, built like a warrior from birth, and had probably never lost a fight in his life. Jake Morrison wore his standard uniform and carried a simple steel knife that Chief Engineer Blake had made from scrap metal. By any measure of combat capability, the fight should have been over before it began. You are not what I expected from a Grimspawn leader, Zexthol said, studying Jake with his glowing eyes. You appear weak, old soft. How do you command such fierce warriors? Jake smiled grimly. You still don't understand, do you? We're not warriors because we're strong. We're strong because we're warriors. The fight began with Zexthol's energy weapon firing a beam that could have cut through steel. But Jake wasn't there when the beam arrived. He had thrown himself to one side, rolled behind a piece of equipment, and was already moving to a new position. This wasn't the kind of combat the Valdari commander expected. Jake didn't stand and fight with honor. He used the environment, set traps, made the cargo bay itself into a weapon. When Zexthol cornered him behind a storage container, Jake had already rigged it with explosives. The blast sent both fighters flying, but Jake was ready for it. He had protected himself and was moving before the smoke cleared. Zexthol was stunned, his armor cracked, his weapon damaged. But the real psychological impact came when Jake could have finished off the alien commander. Instead of delivering a killing blow, Jake helped the wounded Valdari to his feet. I could kill you now, Jake said quietly, but I'm not going to. Do you know why? Zexthol stared at him in confusion. You show mercy to an enemy? This is not how Grimspawn fight. Maybe that's why you never understood us, Jake replied. We don't fight because we love killing. We fight because we love the people we're protecting. Then Jake did something that broke Zexthol's understanding of warfare completely. He dropped his weapon and activated his ship's self-destruct sequence. You have 10 minutes to get your people off this ship and retreat to safe distance, Jake said calmly. If you don't, we all die together. Zexthol felt the deep fear rise up from the very core of his being. This was exactly what the ancient records described, a Grimspawn leader choosing mutual destruction over defeat. The willingness to die not for victory, but simply to protect others. You would kill us all rather than surrender? Zexthol whispered. I would die to save my crew from slavery or torture, yes. That's what humans do. That's what we've always done. That's why your ancestors were so afraid of us. In that moment, 10,000 years of genetic memory crashed over Zexthol like a wave. He saw the truth that his people had tried to forget. The Grimspawn hadn't been defeated because they were impossible to defeat. You couldn't conquer a species that would choose death over surrender. You couldn't intimidate beings who valued their friends' lives more than their own. The war commander began to shake uncontrollably. His warriors, watching through the ship's communication system, saw their greatest leader reduced to a trembling wreck by a human's simple statement of principle. "Cancel the self-destruct," Zexthul begged. "Please, we will withdraw. We will leave your space. Just please do not make us face the choice between death and dishonor." Jake looked at the proud alien warrior who was now cowering before him, not because of superior strength or weapons, but because of what humanity represented, the absolute refusal to accept defeat. "Computer, cancel self-destruct sequence," Jake said. Then he looked directly at Zexthul. "Go home, War Commander. Tell your empire that humans have returned to the stars. Tell them we come in peace, but we will not be conquered or enslaved. Tell them that the Grimspawn remember their friends and their enemies." Within an hour, the entire Valdari fleet was retreating from human space. As they fled, emergency signals were being transmitted across the galaxy. Ancient warning protocols were activating on 1,000 worlds, spreading the news that struck fear into every species that remembered the old stories. The Grimspawn had returned. On the bridge of the horizon, Jake stood with his surviving crew and watched the alien fleet disappear into hyperspace. They had won, not through superior firepower or tactics, but by reminding the galaxy of something it had forgotten, that humanity's greatest weapon had never been technology or strategy. It was the simple refusal to give up. No matter the cost, Admiral Kelly's voice came over the communicator from her flagship. "Captain Morrison, this is going to change everything. When word spreads that humans are back in space, every species in the galaxy is going to react. Some will want to be our allies. Others will want to destroy us before we become too strong." Jake nodded, looking out at the stars that had once belonged to his ancestors. "Then we'd better be ready, Admiral. Because we're not going back to Earth this time. Humanity is here to stay." In the depths of space, the Valdari fleet carried news that would reshape the galaxy. The Grimspawn had returned, and they were exactly as terrifying as the legends remembered.